I wanted today to look at this passage and this section, and really I called it the dragon's war and defeat. We're going to narrow in on it because David's done an excellent job on teaching theologically the overarching patterns and structures. So I just want to hone in on a particular area, which is really chapter 13 and the beast and the call to impatient endurance as well, which so it kind of flows into 14 a little bit, and to look at some of how that looked in history, as I've mentioned before. It's really a story. Although I call it the dragon's war and defeat, that's only because the wider story is of the Lamb's reign and the Lamb's victory. Abaddon or Apollyon appears in Revelation 9:11 as the locust king, and that's kind of his first appearance. He's got synagogue of Satan earlier in the earlier chapters, but he doesn't really make an appearance. He appears as the kind of locust king of the plagues in the seals there. But now, or is that the trumpets? David would remember. But now begins his limelight. Really, Revelation 11:7 is the first time that the beast appears and he kills the two witnesses. And he then makes his final appearance in Revelation 20 and kind of judged by those same witnesses in a way. It's kind of Satan's time, gets more depiction here, which kind of fits the trumpet warning, which is, the classic teaching, which I subscribe to wholeheartedly, is that the seals are the way the same events bless believers and help to seal their faith. And then the trumpet is the same events become are warnings. They're not received as afflictions and blessings to sharpen our faith. They're received as, whoa, let me wake up to God's God is real and God is judging, and I need to repent and I need to follow God. That's the trumpet aspect, and then the bowl, which is just the judgment. The same events are received as bowls by some who, and it just feels like judgment because it doesn't lead to repentance, and so it kind of fits with that more warning thing that this is the end result. If I reject God and I leave God alone, I don't follow him, it's a pretty dark world, and so that's why I've taken the title the way I have, the dragon's war and defeat, to hone in on Revelation 13. However, let's read. If you flip, if you got to the page, the beast from the sea, 13 verse 1. There is a sort of overarching story. The dragon gets booted out of heaven, and he's then got his anger on the earth. But then he brings up his two little proxies, his two pet creatures, a beast from the sea and a beast from the earth. And we'll just read about them now. Then I stood on the shore of the sea, and I saw a beast coming out of the sea. It had 10 horns and 7 heads, with 10 crowns on its horns, and on each head a blasphemous name. And the beast I saw resembled a leopard, but had feet like those of a bear, and a mouth like that of a lion. And the dragon gave the beast his power and his throne and great authority. One of the heads of the beast seemed to have a fatal wound, but the fatal wound had been healed. The whole world was filled with wonder and followed the beast. People worshipped the dragon because he had given authority to the beast. And they also worshipped the beast and asked, who is like the beast? Who can wage war against it? And the beast was given a mouth to utter proud words and blasphemies and to exercise its authority for 42 months. It opened its mouth to blaspheme God and to slander his name and his dwelling place and those who live in heaven. It was given power to wage war against God's holy people and to conquer them. And it was given authority over every tribe, people, language, and nation. All inhabitants of the earth will worship the beast, all whose names have not been written in the Lamb's book of life, the Lamb who was slain from the creation of the world. Whoever has ears to hear, let him hear. If anyone is to go into captivity they will go. If anyone is to be killed with the sword they will be killed. This calls for patient endurance and faithfulness on the part of God's people. And then I saw a second beast coming out of the earth. It had 2 horns like a lamb, but it spoke like a dragon. It exercised all authority of the first beast on its behalf and made the earth and its inhabitants worship the beast, whose fatal wound had been healed. and it performed great signs, even causing fire to come down from heaven to the earth in full view of the people. And because of the signs it was given power to perform on behalf of the first beast, it deceived the inhabitants of the earth. It ordered them to set up an image in order of the beast who was wounded by the sword and yet lived. And the second beast was given power to give breath to the image of the first beast, so that the image could speak and cause all who refused to worship the image to be killed. It also forced all people, great and small, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hands or on their foreheads, so that they could not buy or sell unless they had the mark, which is the name of the beast or the number of its name. And this calls for wisdom. Let the person who has insight calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. That number is 666. Then I looked, and there before me was the Lamb, standing on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000 who had his name and his father's name written on their foreheads. And I heard a sound from heaven like the roar of rushing waters and like a loud peal of thunder. The sound I heard was like that of harpists playing their harps. And they sang a new song before the throne and before the four living creatures and the elders. No one could learn the song except the 144,000 who had been redeemed from the earth. These are those who did not defile themselves with women, for they remained virgins. They followed the Lamb wherever he goes. They were purchased from among mankind and offered as first fruits to God and the Lamb. No lie was found in their mouths. They are blameless. Then I saw another angel flying in midair, and he had the eternal gospel to proclaim to those who live on the earth, to every nation, tribe, language, and people. He said in a loud voice, "Fear God and give him glory, because the hour of his judgment has come. Worship him who made the heavens, the earth, the sea, and the springs of water." A second angel followed and said, "Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great, which made all the nations drink the maddening wine of her adulteries." And a third angel followed them and said in a loud voice, "If anyone worships the beast and its image and receives its mark on their forehead or on their hand, they too will drink the wine of God's fury, which has been poured full strength into the cup of his wrath. They will be tormented with burning sulfur in the presence of the holy angels and of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment will rise forever and ever. There will be no rest, day or night, for those who worship the beast and its image, or for anyone who receives the mark of its name. This calls for patient endurance on the part of the people of God who keep his commands and remain faithful to Jesus. And then I heard a voice from heaven say, "Write this, blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on. Yes, says the Spirit, they will rest from their labor, for their deeds will follow them." We said last time, as we looked at the sort of mark of the beast, that really this is what we've just read could be viewed as a simple remix, a Revelation John remix of the great theme of the Bible, which is God versus the devil, Christ versus Satan, Antichrist, wisdom versus folly, and it's just another way of expressing. You could consider the foolish builder and the wise builder. There are lots of those kind of, you've got two ways to live, two choices, and it's just a re-expression of that classic story. You can choose to follow the beast or the lamb, and find accordingly. And 144,000 isn't, we wouldn't believe that it's a sort of a select group. It's just a picture of the fullness of God's people. It's God's people. Yes, they're few compared to the number of the world, but they conquer, and they're virgins in that they're not defiled with the whore Babylon, who's the sort of like in Proverbs, she's portrayed that way. So that would be roughly it. The sort of overarching view. I don't want this to get lost. This isn't a novel teaching to the Bible. This is quite consistent with lots of other biblical imagery. Nonetheless, there are some really cool, some great features of this teaching that I think really help to flesh out and develop some ideas that I want to dig into today, because I think they're amazing. And the first one would be that satanic influence creates an unholy trinity. You're gonna need your text to hand, because we're gonna look at this quite carefully. In verse 13 verse 1, it says, I stood on the shore of the sea, and I saw a beast coming out of the sea. It had 10 horns and 7 heads, with 10 horns on its crowns, and on each head a blasphemous name. So the 7 heads and 10 crowns immediately takes you back to 12 verse 3, where it says, I saw another sign in heaven, behold, a great fiery red dragon, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns on its heads. And so you're immediately, the beast that comes out of the sea, which everyone is kind of agreed is a political empire, stands for political empire. It's also clearly satanic. It's got satanic influence, and it's clearly being linked by John with satanic government, a satanic empire. And if you were in any doubt, verse 2 says, the beast I saw resembled a leopard, but had feet like a bear and mouth like a lion. The dragon gave the beast his power and his throne. So then the dragon is very, very clearly that dragon from 12:3 and Satan. Beyond dispute, he's even named as Satan earlier, the serpent of old. In verse 12, in 12 verse 9, it says that great dragon was hurled down, that ancient serpent called the devil, or Satan, who leads the whole world astray. So there's no doubt here that there's a connection made between political empire and satanic influence, and satanic empire in its extreme. Then it kind of shouldn't surprise you that satanic government exists, because we know, and this influence exists, because we know that the devil's temptation of Jesus, he took him up on a high mountain and he said, behold, here, all the kingdoms of the world I can give to you if you will fall down. They were, in a sense, in his power to give under God. He had been given them. And then on the flip, as we look into the next section, it might not surprise you that one of his other temptations was kind of to make Jesus a Messiah-like character, to fall down off the temple and become a sort of, wow, he's coming down on lifted up by angels. Maybe he's a Messiah. So there's that religious aspect. Tertullian, an early church father, viewed satanic government as the only kind of government. He would say that at the best of times, and he was a lawyer, so and he was a lawyer in the Roman legal system, which was quite good in many ways, before he was a Christian. And he said, at the best of times, it's demons chained up and struggling. It's struggling to do its Romans 13 job, to reward good and punish evil. But at the worst of the times, when it's not doing that, and it's not restrained by good laws and the citizenry who are in line with Scripture, it's demons off the chain. And then at that point, Revelation 13 is more applicable. I found it interesting. I've been listening to a guy called Eric Enloe an awful lot, some of you know, and he's a dean of a law school in Korea, South Korea. And he says that both these passages, Romans 13 and Revelation 13, are critical for Christian lawyers trying to understand Christianity and law. And he sees this chapter as speaking of the final fulfillment of world history and the end point to which all government is heading. Of course, there is another government that's coming, which is upon his shoulders, and it will shatter every government. But the end point of human government without reference to God. If you look at 13 verse 11, the second beast, you'll see some parallels here. I saw a second beast coming out of the earth. It had 2 horns like a lamb. Incidentally, the reference to the dragon having 7 horns, or 10, I forget, it kind of mixes up. It's a kind of brings you back to Revelation 5, verse 6, where it says that there was a lamb with 7 horns and 7 eyes in the horns. So maybe it's power, or it can be a savior, it can be a great strength. There's a vying for power, but there's kind of parallels. It's Christ as the savior, or the state as the savior. It's Christ as the power, or the state as the power. Satan's all powerful, or God is all powerful. There are sort of parallels there that are kind of implicit in the text and in the wider scope of Scripture. But this second beast, it has two horns like a lamb. It's kind of lamb-like as well. But it speaks like a dragon. Again, the reference is clear. So there's a deception involved. And it's like the lamb front. If you've got God, the Father, and we have the Father, the Son, the Holy Ghost. Well, here we have Satan, politics, and religion, and this is his power construct, if you like. It deceives them, and together, taken as a whole, together, it works very powerfully, and it deceives the world into unholy worship. Look at verse 3. One of the heads of the beast seemed to have a fatal wound, had a fatal wound, but the fatal wound had been healed. The whole world was filled with wonder and followed the beast. People worshipped the dragon because he had given authority to the beast, and they also worshipped the beast and asked, who is like the beast? Sorry, we'll leave that for a little bit later. It has this miraculous sign. It does signs and wonders, and it has a partnership that it's based on. In section, if you look at verse 12, it exercises this is the second beast, exercises all authority of the first beast on its behalf, and made the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast, whose fatal wound had been healed. And it performed great signs, even causing them to come down from fire, to come down from heaven to earth. So there is a clear partnership. One references the other, references its marvels, and gets the world to worship it. Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I don't believe that you can consider either beast on its own. Both beasts have to be considered together because they are together. And we're going to go through it point by point, and you'll see that there's a lot of crossover. There's a lot of collaboration in various different ways. One can't exist without the other. The state, I would suggest, this is borrowing from a guy called Rush Dooney. The state is always a religious institution. It is not only the church or an obvious faith that is a religious institution. The state itself is always religious, because laws determine if a citizen is worthy of reward or punishment. Laws determine the state's view on good or bad, moral, immoral, just, unjust, and righteous, unrighteous. In the Greek, righteous, unrighteous, or the word ius in Latin is the same word for righteous, but in our culture and language they've separated, but they're very similar. They're linked ideas. They're in the same word, slightly different meanings, but aspects of the same thing. Just or unjust, righteous or unrighteous, holy or unholy, and those who hit their standards are blessed and rewarded, and those who do not are failed. And therefore, where a state rejects God's law and moves away from God's law, it creates false religion. Definitionally, it cannot do otherwise. Religion and politics, therefore, are deeply connected issues. It's amusing that they are often banned in British polite speech from talking about at the table, but they're deeply connected. And the Bible, you can see here, encourages considering them together, and it shows the link. It's even more than this passage, though, because the sea beast, or the second beast here, is, I would maintain, is also the false prophet and Babylon. They're just different pictures for very, very similar ideas that he's developing, and they allow development. And it's a rich idea that develops across these chapters from 12 to 20-ish, and in different cycles and different patterns. And I just want to prove that to you, because I don't want you to trust me. I believe you should not trust your teachers, but check them daily. 14:8 references fallen is Babylon the Great. during the seventh bowl, Babylon is slain, and in 16 to 19 depict Babylon in great detail, her diabolical life, her final fall, and her conquest. To give you some specific verses that link them very obviously together, 16:13, I'll read it out. And I saw 3 unclean spirits like frogs coming out of the mouth of the dragon. We've had the dragon here. Coming out of the mouth of the beast. We've had the beast here. And out of the mouth of the second beast. It doesn't say that. It says out of the mouth of the false prophet. Second beast. 17:3. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast. No, it sounds a bit similar to the red dragon, which was full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. So it kind of sounds like sounds also like the political beast as well. But it's the woman sitting on. The partnership is of a woman sitting on this creature. And 1920. Then the beast was captured, and with him the false prophet who worked signs in his presence, and you can see the sign working stuff. Yeah, so there's no doubt we've seen it's very clear the sign working stuff. You'll recall from our reading. I won't repeat it. Worked signs in his prophet by which he deceived those who received the mark of the beast and those who worshipped his image. Very similar language and ideas. You can see that the false prophet is the second beast. These 2 were cast alive into the lake of fire, burning with brimstone. 20 verse 10, the devil who deceived them was cast into the lake of fire where the beast and the false prophet are. So you get this unholy trinity is linked together quite carefully across Revelation. I would show you a coin. Let me pull it up here. Let's see if we can. No one's on Zoom, so it doesn't matter unduly. Wow. You're going to see this. Whoosh. Oh, you might be able to. Right. Whoosh. There. This coin is of a Roman coin. They didn't discover it for quite a while. Here is Roma, the goddess Roma. Her name is there. And there's the wolf that suckled, allegedly, Romulus and Remus. Oh, I should have done that question for the kids. You probably know these stories. So Romulus and Remus founded Rome. Romulus gets killed by his brother. Remus gets killed by his brother Romulus. But here, this goddess, she's sitting on 7 hills. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 hills, and it's very deliberate. And so the reference in Revelation is very, very striking. It's unmistakable. In fact, when he says Babylon, she sits on 7 hills, which are 7 mountains, or 7 horns, I forget which, 7 heads, which are 7 mountains. It's a clear, to anyone reading in the Roman Empire, that's like, well, we know what you're saying. It's not difficult to understand. But again, it's just a picture. So one brother said that Rome is just a type, in as much that there are other reasons for saying they used to sum Nero's name by gematria to 666. Nero Caesar would be summed to 666, and they'd say that so clearly early Christians, that's one of the I think you mentioned it, why they turned it to 616 one time, because I think that was just Nero under another gematria system. So clearly the early Christians had an association of Nero and Rome with the beast. And one brother, he says it's not that this is the only time it's talking about. It's that Nero serves as the type of every Antichrist regime and every beastly system thereafter. So you kind of see it following. There we are. So that's that. The partnership, like the unholy trinity, and this how they work together. One performs signs on the other, gets the others to worship it. There's a collaboration and partnership which you see developed throughout Revelation. We're looking specifically at Revelation 13, but I'm just showing you that it's a broader picture, and therefore it's what I'm teaching you is sound. It's orthodox teaching. powerfully deceptive miracles. Now I've really thought about this, because these are dramatic, aren't they? It's like, well, I don't know, I've never seen this happen. Fatal wound, received a fatal wound that had been healed. And then the second beast points at it and says, hey, look at the fatal wound that's been healed. And then it also calls down fire from heaven. It's like, wow, this is dramatic. Now, have any of you ever heard of any Antichrist, any so-called Antichrist regime in history, or beastly regime in history, of which there are many, there are many, doing a sign like that? Let me read again. This is a sort of similar verse that might make you think and expect this kind of behavior. Matthew 24:24 says, false Christ, this is Jesus speaking on the Temple Mount when he predicts the destruction of the temple. He says, for false Christs and false prophets will rise and show great signs and wonders to deceive, if it were possible, even the elect. Now, surely many have come, but we don't hear of many great signs and wonders. Now, have any of you thought of some? You might want to. If I'm just missing out some obvious ones, then you can shout. We can discuss this further afterwards, because I confess I'm a little short of ideas on this, but I have got some ideas. And I wonder if we're not thinking too narrowly in terms of what's called the signs and wonders movement today, which is all about the sort of healings and that dramatic kind of stuff. Man gets out of his wheelchair and so on. It's clearly there. This cult, presented in Revelation by picture and presented in Jesus's language also by picture, is clearly very dramatic and very powerful and very persuasive, and people look at it and go, wow, I'm following this. This is amazing. There's a rescue from apparent disaster. You could say that perhaps in Rome under Hitler's time, maybe people might have said, wow, it was Weimar Republic, they're going with wheelbarrows of money, and all of a sudden Hitler comes in, and some people say it was his predecessor that did the economics, but suddenly their economy is much better and they're much more stable. And maybe they go, wow, I don't know, this is just me thinking. Maybe they go, wow, Hitler's turned this around. Isn't he great? I mean, this is incredible. We were stuck like rats in a trap, and Hitler's got us out of this. Wow, great guy. Or Mao, in a different way. I wonder if I'm also wondering, how did Christians see it when they were interpreting? Because Christians, I personally believe that beastly regimes existed from Rome, from before Rome. I think Babylon of old was a beastly regime. Egypt was a kind of beastly regime. All these systems will fit this pattern that God is talking about here. So I always think, how did people in those regimes see it? And I wonder if, they talked of Mao. I don't know if you know about Mao, but he was on the long march. Yeah, he wrote, what is it, 5,000 miles, something crazy. He walked, and they walked by foot over mountains. They lost loads of people. He thought, he's surely gone. He's gone. He was completely surrounded. And you think, he's surely dead. He's surely a nobody. But he eventually pursued all the way, came in, and by the time he got to wherever he got, he was welcomed as Lord and King. And he comes back from the dead, as it were. And it's amazing. Did they see that? Did they see it as a sort of, he's received a fatal wound, but he's come back? Did Christians talk amongst themselves, and did that help them to identify this? This regime is claiming miraculous power. It's claiming a miraculous, God-given, divine blessing. And do they then reject that? I know some have seen parallels with a certain person's Easter Sunday speech saying that his life was saved by the NHS. They might see religious connotations in that and similar claims. I think one important feature, really important feature, is deception. And this is echoed by 2 Thessalonians, the passage there about deception and strong delusion. That if we're not assuming powerful satanic deception that will fool the whole world, every inhabitant, you can't ignore these passages. It's so specific that the whole world will follow this guy. You ask someone, do you want to follow Satan? No one's going to say, yeah, I'm down with that. No one's going to say it. So people only follow Satan because he's deceived them. Generally speaking, there are very few out-and-out Satanists who, even if you meet a hardcore Satanist or someone who's into Wicca or whatever, they will actually say Satan's actually a god of light. He's actually a good guy. He's actually the illuminator. He brings light. It's God that's the bad guy. So even then, he's not the Satan that we recognize as the destroyer, the liar, the deceiver, the person who kills and oppresses. It's a different Satan. He sold himself differently. So even the people that openly follow Satan typically acknowledge that would not follow what we believe. They've still been deceived. Very few people are into a God that eats people alive and is diabolical, really truly diabolical, understanding what he's like. And I'd argue the ones that are have been demon possessed, or they've just, something terrible has happened, that they've got to that place. So I think it's important to see in these passages, they reek of powerful deception. They reek of persuasive deception, such that it just seems like the right thing to do. These people are great. They're salvific. They're blessing society. And yeah, they're wonderful, and we should expect that. And therefore, as a result of that, we should watch and pray, and we should test the spirits, and we should be careful about what we believe and how we believe. My third point of 4 is that these beasts, they work together in partnership. This unholy trinity works together in partnership, deceptive partnership, with enormous strength, forcing idolatrous state religion. Let me read you well, let's look at the text before it first. Verse 4, the second part of verse 4 says, they worship the beast and asked, who is like the beast? Who can wage war against it? They see in the beast an irresistible power, and they feel hopeless and helpless before it. This is too great, too powerful to resist. And it's on a, you see this echoed in the power that's given in verse 15. It says the second beast was given power to breathe breath into the image of the beast, so the image could speak and cause all who refused the image to be killed. And it also forced ... It has a massive physical power of coercion and forcing worship and order. That's a real feature, an obvious feature of it. It has great strength to force both its religious arm and its political arm as they work together, and people are overwhelmed. Secondly, it's idolatrous. It's openly, clearly idolatrous. Look at verses 5 to 6. The beast was given a mouth to utter proud words and blasphemies, and to exercise its authority for 42 months, which, as David has excellently said, it's like times and a half time. It's a period just denoting that it's going to be it's going to seem like it's too long. It's going to seem like it is long, and then 2 long times, and then half the time it'll suddenly be cut short when you don't expect it. Typically in church history, by the way, for your encouragement, if we ever do enter such a season, these things go in spikes. I think humans can't bear killing humans for too long. And so even in Rome, the periods of persecution knew typically 10 years of intensity, and then it would be relieved. Even the Cultural Revolution in China, where they killed lots and lots of people, it was about 10 years of ferociousness, and then it would let up and be relieved. And I think from 2018, a lot of Christians in China will say they're going through another sort of bad phase. That's just an aside on that. But it opened its mouth to blaspheme God and to slander his name, verse 6, and his dwelling place and those who live in heaven. It's openly blasphemous and idolatrous and against God. And if you look in 1b in verse 1, again, the second bit, it says on each head a blasphemous name. It's a characteristic of it is that it's opposed to God, and it mocks him, it hates him, it will abuse his laws and abuse his character. 14b, it says it orders them, this is the idolatry, that they set up an image in honor of the beast. And we know that no image can be set up, can be made of God to worship other than the image of God, which is Christ. He's the only image of God we can worship, and that's one made by God. And so in bringing a corrupt religion, it deliberately brings a corrupt religion in. there is some just to look at this power. Eric Enlow, I was interested to see, also used the word totalitarian. He would say it's talking about totalitarian power, and we'll come on more to that in the next section. And that the dictionary definition of that is relating to or being or imposing a form of government in which the political authority exercises absolute and centralized control over all aspects of life. The individual is subordinated to the state, and opposing political and cultural expression is suppressed, or a system of government where the people have virtually no authority and the state wields absolute control of every aspect of the country, socially, financially, and politically. And it's all characterized by a government in which political authority exercises absolute control. And if you're not sure about that, there are examples. There was an interesting thing on abusive relationships, just generally brought out by the WMHI, Work Mental Health Place, and they've worked for a lot of the world's top international firms, and they did something on abusive relationship and gave a number of signs that kind of help you to understand what invasive looks like. And as you look at this passage, you can see, yes, they're ticking those boxes in terms of control. And it might be a good test for you to apply in any time in history. You think of Hitler, did he do this kind of stuff? Think of, or whatever, Jim Crow or Rome, did they start messing with these things? So he said, stop you seeing your friends and family, and that could be who you can associate with. Yes, we know they always do that. They always stop you associating with people. Won't let you go out without permission. Think of Nazis, papers, please, classic expression. They tell you what to wear. Even in Jesus' time, you've got to wear the tassels or what have you. Monitor your phone or email. So think of the surveillance state of China, the communication control, invading personal space. Controlling the finances or won't let you work. We'll come on to that in a second, because that's a classic one, and it's so classic that God actually names it, and it specifically describes it, and that can really be taken as a symbol of almost everything. Controlling what you read, watch, and say. Think of the book burnings, very classic things in Nazi Germany. As soon as they're influencing what you read and say, it's just a classic thing of totalitarianism as we define it. And like it's interesting, the 20th century, Hannah Arendt would say totalitarian is only 20th century. No, it's clearly not. You think of religious totalitarianism in Jesus' time, people were afraid to speak. You can dominate through religion, and that's why he uses religion, because Satan on his own is merely politics people can resent. If you can make it dramatic and beautiful. My grandfather once told my dad, when he took him around a Roman Catholic church and looked at the gold on the altar, he said they robbed the people to do these things, but the gold and the drama made it powerful. It was theatre. It makes it persuasive and beautiful, and that took the minds of the people. So it's part of that deceptive miracle stuff. Monitoring what you do, punishing you for breaking rules, but the rules keep changing. Tell you that it's for your own good and that they know better. There's 15 signs. We're on number 10. Don't allow you to question it. Tell you you're crazy and no one agrees with you, call you names or shame you for being stupid or selfish, gaslight you, challenge your memory of events, make you doubt yourself, dismiss your opinions, or play the victim. If things go wrong, it's all your fault. It's the blame game. That's just an example of a typical patterns of abusive behavior. And if you get that in a marriage, it specifically says if you get it in a marriage, in a workplace, or in governments, be concerned. And talk to a professional about it. People shouldn't treat you like that, and they can treat you like that. And the devil always does this. These are his characteristics. He lies. He wants to control you. He wants to make your life miserable. He's the accuser of the brethren. All this stuff. So if you find this stuff whether in personal relationships or in God forbid in our church, God forbid I should be doing something like that and suppress opinion or whatever, you should feel free to be able to be yourself and have your own opinion. And communicate it. So there's this. That's what abusiveness can look like. And some of you, some of you might find, if you think of Nazi Germany, and they put Nazi swastika banners in the churches, would you have found that blasphemous? Yeah, it's blasphemous, isn't it? What about if They put a Buddha on the altar to Assisi, in Assisi. And Pope John Paul II's time, they got a Buddha and they put it on the altar of Assisi. I'd say, I'm not really into altars, but I'd say the symbol is blasphemous. What they're doing is symbolically blasphemous. And sometimes people can use, and Satan's really into it. He really wants to corrupt things. And so, like, you think of the KKK, fiery cross associated with harming our brethren. That's a blasphemous image as well, isn't it? It's like claiming Christ is into that blasphemy. It's typical. These things are just typical of every regime. Little Red Book. I think of the Gideon's book. You know, the Gideons of the New Testament. But what am I referencing in the Little Red Book? China. Mao had a Little Red Book. Everyone had to carry it. If you didn't carry it, didn't know the sayings, memorize his sayings. He had Mao's sayings. It's just blasphemous. And North Korea is a classic. They all devolve into personality cults, don't they? Little golden statues of the leader. Even it's atheist, it's got a religious arm, and it makes a show of the religion and makes it persuasive and powerful. Now, whatever you think about some of the things that have happened, and some of them may be good or neutral or bad, in other words, and there's probably a range of opinions here. I think we can probably agree that some of the imagery that's been employed is both religious and blasphemous. This would be one of them in Brazil. You can see it. Who knows what that is? What's that? Does anyone know? Yes, it's in Rio de Janeiro. You know how big it is? It's pretty big. It's 100 feet or so. And on it, it says Mascara Salva. And it's a bit like the next one, this one here, which says Vaccina Salva in Portuguese, and this one saves. And so I put my hypothesis that it's blasphemous, and like you said, the vaccine may be good or whatever, or bad. That's neither here nor there to this discussion. That imagery, I would suggest, is blasphemous because it's one in putting this message onto Christ. Two, it's grammatically incorrect. Why do you think it's grammatically incorrect? Or what is the grammatical error? Young people, do you know it? It says vaccine saves. What is wrong about that grammar? There's something very wrong with it. Yeah, a vaccine saves, the vaccine saves, or really vaccines save. Should be would be the message. Vaccine save is the message they're trying to communicate. Why do you think they're doing that? Any ideas? What's a popular phrase that's like it, that's rather well known? Jesus saves. Yeah, it's very clear. I'd say it's indisputably blasphemous. Some of the language that's been employed I would say, is blasphemous. It offends me. This offended Gavin Ashenden, who was the chaplain to the Queen, and he viewed this as blasphemous. He reported this photo on the altar, not a Buddha on the altar, but a NHS, we thank you. And he probably objected it maybe because they also do abortions. I don't know. But they do many other things. But it's that place. It may be a great institution and wonderful thing, and many of us are very thankful for it in various points in our life. But nonetheless, it is not appropriate, I would suggest, to give it that preeminence and that prominence. But much like we went past two churches, I have the same beef with climate. We went past two churches yesterday, and it was like, oh, but praying for our planet, not a word about the Christ who made the planet. And and you think, hang on a tick, this is bowing to COP26 or whatever. And the language has been clearly employed. There's been salvation language around this, injecting hope. Matt Hancock's employed the language of Holy Trinity 3 times. The Holy Trinity of government, academia, and industry has made this possible. There's a site called Your Neighbor that said, this is just a typical example, when it comes to sharing the good news of the COVID vaccines, and they may be good, but this language I'm not comfortable with. When it comes to sharing the good news of the COVID vaccines, the best way to give hope to your neighbors is through a kind of constructive conversation. It's as simple as hope. Anyway, D, conquering, point 4, the last of my points under the beast. With great strength, he forces idolatrous religion and he conquers God's people. And he's got a defiling mark, this mark of the beast. Val summed it up last time, which I thought was really helpful, as I think the mark is, in a sense, it's agreement with this world system or the empire system. And I said maybe it's when a human soul becomes characterized by a law that is other than the Lamb's law. The Lamb says, don't insult, honor marriage, honor family, don't deceive, love your enemies, avoid hypocrisy. And ultimately, Jesus summarized the 10 words by the 2 great commandments, and then he modified them and said, actually, love, let me show you what love means. It's when I say love God and love your neighbor, I mean it, love as I have loved you. I'll show you what love means. And he shows it supremely on the cross. That is the law of the Lamb. And that is the law he wants to write on your heart. I don't know if you're down with that. If you're down with him writing that law, it's all his laws, but that's the height of it. That's the height of it. You can't say no to any of his laws. They're all beautiful. They're all about that love. They're all for your good. You may not understand why they're for your good, but work with him. Talk to Jesus about it, or come and chat with David or I or your fellow neighbor here. Because I know a lot of the laws, the little laws, we can have trouble with. But in this beauty of think of the Lamb on the cross, this is what I mean by love, says God. When I say, I want you to love one another, and that's what he says. When you love me, I want you to love one another like this. And I just think I can't criticize him. He's just beautiful. Some of the ancient marks, because Satan's into his outward, Rome had a few, I think. It had this outward incense. He climbed up from handling a coin. You handle a denarius that says this is the Son of God. Caesar, Augustus, the Son of God. And that's kind of blasphemy. Do you think, do I handle it? Do I not handle it? Then you've got the next one, which says guild membership. Can I be in a guild? If I can't be in a guild unless I get involved in their worship and their orgies, and that's morally compromising for me, so I can't be in it. So am I, the buying and selling that I'm forbidden, is that affecting my my ability to participate in buying or selling? Is it just about entrepreneurship, or is it really, does it become ultimate in the case of offering incense? If you didn't offer incense at times to the Roman emperor, you would be killed. You'd be thrown to the lions. It was incense or lions. 2 places to go. And so sometimes these could manifest in physical ways that were kind of obvious. And like we said, in China, it could be party membership, or Russia, anywhere communist. You want to get ahead, you've got to become a communist party. You've got to deny the existence of God. You've got to be in the Hitler Youth, whatever. There are many ways that these false religious systems try and persuade people and get people into it. Sorry. So, yeah, just to read these last passages to see the power over the beast, over the church that's given. Verse 7, it was given power to wage war against God's holy people and to conquer them. I'm sorry, I know some Christians are into the rapture and escaping trouble, but I just, I don't see it. And in lots of places, it's a nice idea. I hope I'm wrong. I hope God's merciful to me and picks me up anyway if I'm wrong. But I can't imagine why I should be the only. Is Maxwell? Yes. We'll come to that. We'll come to that. We'll come to that in a moment. I think it'll be obvious to you. I don't think it's going to be rocket science. So, and I think Christians will tell you. Other Christians will let you know. So it's fine. Is the short answer. 7. And I also think it's eternally present. It was present 10 years ago. As Totalitarian said, it's always there. It's always a war. There's always a tension between Christ and the beast. It's always waiting to come off the chains and devour. And it always, in some ways, it's trying to corrupt and oppress his people. Sometimes it becomes more manifest. Sometimes it kills. Its teeth come out, but it's always there. And it's always wanting to gain. Satan is always wanting to gain more power.
It feels like, I have to look out for this piece. I have to search for this piece, and I have to be aware of this piece.
it's just, in as much as it says test the spirits, I don't think it's going to be rocket science, most. We'll come to it in a moment, because I really don't think I personally don't think it's hard at all, and challenging. But acknowledge it is power. If you're not prepared to look, there are some people that say absolutely, they just say absolutely not. And they will say that about other times in history. They'll say that wasn't a beast. I just think loads of these regimes have been beasts in the past. It's obvious. Let's just call a spade a spade. We may come to different views on that, and that's cool. And in our church, we may come to different views, and I'm cool with that. But what's obvious to one person may be not obvious to another, or wrong. We'll get there. I want to press on. 7, it was given power to wage war against God's holy people and to conquer them. And it was given authority over every tribe, people, language, and nation. All inhabitants of the earth will worship the beast, all those whose names have not been written in the Lamb's book of life, the Lamb who was slain from the creation of the world. The parallel is in 16 and 17. In some ways, it forced all people, great and small, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hands and on their foreheads, so that they could not buy or sell unless they had the mark, which is the name of the beast, or the number of its name. So I hope you can see the parallels. Again, it's the partnership, it's working together and creating this stuff. And I think presently, for instance, there are some clear markers. There were markers that Jews were started to get kicked out of jobs. That's the first thing. They started to move them from civic government. And as soon as you start discriminating, I'd say, on people and say you can't have certain jobs, you can't come into certain places. It happened with black people in various places. It happened with Jews in that place. It happened with Christians in early Rome. It said that I don't want those Christians to, the Jews said, that the Jewish authorities said, don't let a Christian into your house, don't let them into your sect. They're a sect, they're a heretic, don't let them in. So this kind of discrimination has happened for a very long time in various ways. It doesn't always quite look the same, but when you see this kind of stuff happening, it's impacting buying or selling. It's beastly, it's abusive, and it's beastly. If someone's invading your buying and sell space, your ability to earn a living, to survive in the marketplace, that's abuse, and it's satanic, and it's the kind of thing this is speaking about in very general terms, and it can apply differently. Right now, in Australia, in Austria, in Canada, in New Zealand, in France, in Italy, in the US, in Germany, in Lithuania, as far as I know, to name a few, maybe not Germany, in all those places, if you don't have a jab, there can be no job in certain regimes. Also in the UK, in care, you don't have a regime, and you don't have a job. You know that Sajid has announced that in the NHS it will be the same, that you won't have a job. Slovenia, you don't get a salary if you haven't been vaxxed. So I'd say there's an instance where something is being used, and that could be morally neutral in and of itself. Under Hitler's time, nationalism is a good idea. It's biblical. It says I saw people of all nations in the new creation now. It doesn't say we become one nation. It says all nations and languages and tribes. That your national identity, your ethnic identity is even of God. There can be beautiful, positive things about that. A positive thing like nationalism can be taken by a beast and misused. It doesn't make the thing itself morally evil. It's the use of it and misuse of it that makes it saying, this way is better, white is better, vaccinated is better, or unvaccinated, whatever. But what's happening, typically the state makes one better and the other unprivileged. Those who acknowledge Nero as God, better, and the rest cut out. And when you get that, that's the kind of behavior that we're talking about here. They cut out of jurors. There's discussions going on. It's actually happened in some places, and in the US, New York, California. It's been Ontario, Canada. Discussion in Australia. MPs are banned from Parliament in Australia. In Latvia, lawmakers are banned from in-person and remote Parliament meetings. There's an unvaccinated lockdown in Austria as well. Singapore won't cover medical bills for those unvaccinated by choice. Where the right to assemble, socialize, and work without coercion, operate a business, make personal medical choices, and be considered equal, and express peaceful protests, where those are gone, it's quite a deep thing. There's a brother here who wrote, a creationist brother from Australia, who wrote a letter. He's John Mackay. He didn't mind this being shared. He's John Mackay from Croatian Research International and UK. And he said some very sad news. This is on the 13th, I think. Oh no, it must be the 11th of November or the 9th, something like that. He said that some very sad news. As of December the 9th, our state government has issued a dire warning. Anyone not vaccinated by December the 17th will be locked out of pubs, clubs, public entertainment spaces, weddings, social activity spaces, hospitals, nursing and care homes, museums, libraries, schools, etc. They will only be treated in a hospital if it's an end-of-life care or an emergency. And despite the fact that the government is selling this idea, is look at the new freedoms gained by all the vaccinated. You remember how that happened in the UK? Freedom Day was the day they announced vaccine passports as well, and limitations on freedom. Doublespeak. Most Aussies are rightly viewing it as, look at all the punishments being placed upon the unvaccinated as a COVID crucifixion. As is being wisely said, the unvaxxed may as well just start wearing a big yellow star. Draconian is one word, demonic is another, as open war is pronounced on all who refuse vaccination. Some states have enforced all households with unvaccinated people will be visited, rest left unsaid. Many Christians and non-Christians in business, include those fully vaxxed. Whether for or against the whole situation, we're already on the edge of bankruptcy, so removing around 20% of potential customers is a nightmare. I checked this with a brother, a pastor I work with in data business of my work. And he said, yes, this is true. Each state's coming up with its own rule. He said, right now in my state, I can't go to any retail stores. I can't sit down in a restaurant, get a haircut, go to the movies. I can't have anyone over to my house or go to someone else's house. Of particular concern for me is that the NSW legislation puts the onus for enforcement on the individual, i.e. it's illegal to allow an unvaxxed person into your home. So the laws really do drive a wedge through our society and turn people against each other. Now, moving on, the call for patient endurance. It's really important to see when this stuff happens, and it seems like, oh, who can resist it? It's very powerful. It's not very powerful. The call for endurance happens in the middle. It's sandwiched in the middle and it happens again at the end. So let's just look at that for a bit. He says, whoever has ears, let them hear. If any is to go into captivity they will go. If anyone is to be killed with the sword they will be killed. That's an almost direct quote from Jeremiah. And it's just saying, when God's judgments happened, this is happening. This is deep. This has happened not over it's not been a year's work. The judgment of sending Israel into Babylon was of centuries in the making. And this is really centuries in the making. In this context, he's saying when judgment comes like this, and you get really powerful beastly empires emerge that start to really do this stuff, then it's a judgment that's been coming, and it's been centuries in the making. Typically, you consider I think we've killed 73 million kids since 1921, when it began. Legalized abortion began in Russia. This calls for patient endurance and faithfulness on the part of God's people. And this is how victory comes. It comes in this way. Like if you look at 12 verse 11, it says they triumphed over him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. They did not love their lives so much as to shrink from death. And he's preparing here. He's preparing his people to not shrink from death. That's the real deal. He's been very, very clear, isn't he? He said, you'll be conquered. You've been given over to, there's power to conquer. But don't shrink from death when it comes. Don't shrink from death. Some of you will die and some of you won't. Don't shrink from it when it comes. At the end, in 24, and it's the end of this section, it's a similar thing. He says, I saw thrones, and they sat on them, and judgment was committed to them. And then I saw the souls of those who had been beheaded for their witness to Jesus and for the word of God. And again, you could think there, blood of the Lamb by the power of their testimony. You can see both ideas, can't you, there? It's wrapped up. This is the beginning and the end of this entire section. It's very clear. This is a means of conquest. This is a means of triumph. like the cross was a means of triumph. And that's why in our songs we've been saying, as the Lamb, who's the great example, the great person we remember, the great person, never have so many died for, owed so much to so few. And he's that great example. And it's encouraging us. And verse 20, verse 4 says, don't receive the mark on their foreheads or on their hands. And like I said, it's not about the physical. There are like minor superficial things that Satan uses to do his buying or selling. But the mark isn't about those things. It's not about nationalism, or even there are a lot of, it's about the law. Do I endorse viewing myself as better than anyone? Do I endorse the law that the devil's trying to teach? This law that's corrupting? And the answer must be no. Don't embrace unlawful laws. I would urge you, I think these passages are urging you very, very strongly. It's very, very dangerous to your soul to take on unlawful laws. Let's read on to, he picks up the second call as he goes into the Lamb, and he sees these 144K who are not defiled. They sing, they follow the Lord, and they're victorious. They're with God forever. And we know that they're from 9. We know that they must be those they've not defiled themselves. It says earlier, they haven't defiled themselves. Verse 4, these did not defile themselves. They follow the Lamb wherever he goes. They don't follow the beast. They follow the Lamb. And Babylon will fall and all her laws, and all those who commit adultery with her, with the false prophet. If you buy into this false religious wonder, in whatever age it is, and whatever manifestation, if you get into the beast's religion, it's a very, very dangerous thing to put on another law than the law of Christ's love. He says, he reminds them and encourages them. If anyone worships the beast or its image and receives its mark on their forehead or hand, 14:10, they too will drink the wine of God's fury, which has been poured full strength into the cup of his wrath. They will be tormented with burning sulfur in the presence of the holy angels and of the Lamb, and of the smoke of their torment will rise forever and ever. There will be no rest day or night for those who do worship the beast. Get into it, and let's go there again, just to be clear. This is, like I said, it's a classic remix of the gospel story. It's really pick up your cross and follow me. Don't be part of the world. And when he said, people can think, oh, what have I done this? What have I crossed some magical line I can never be saved? That's ridiculous. Think of this, the way God speaks. He says, he's trying to be blunt. He's trying to communicate. He says, if any deny me, I will deny them, doesn't he? But Peter denied him, didn't he? And did that mean Jesus denied him? No, Jesus worked to restore him. What he's trying to say is saying, don't go there. Please, don't go there. My children, don't go there. Come follow me. Don't deny me. Embrace the pain. Don't go down with the beast and its thing. Now, we all make mistakes. We're all, in a sense, we're all born under a beastly system, and we've embraced its divisions, embraced its betterness. Its ideas are better that are wrong, that are false. And I have to repent of those and say, you know what? I don't want your view of what's right and what's good. I want to hear Christ and his view of what's good and what's right and what's true. And I want to follow the Lamb in what I do. So he's trying to save us from becoming a false prophet. He's saying later, he says, come out of Babylon, my people. Come out of her. She's going down. She's going to sink in flames. Don't be part of that. And I think some of this stuff it's like in the Sermon on the Mount. In the Sermon on the Mount, he talks about, he says, blessed are the humble, blessed are they when they persecute you. And immediately he then starts to say, the law has been completely corrupted. They completely misused the law. You shall not murder. They twisted it. You shall not commit adultery. They twisted it. You shall not let your yes be yes and your no be no. They twisted it. They deceived. And then he says they've got false religion. Their prayer, their fasting, everything about their religious system is fake and a joke. And all of a sudden, you can imagine people who weren't that worried when he started his sermon on the Mount. Imagine you're there hearing it. It's like, oh, fuzzy, nice feeling. Blessed are they. Oh, I feel good. And all of a sudden, you're like, oh my days, this guy's just setting himself completely against the entire reigning system of our day. I wasn't worried about losing my job, but I am now. I wasn't worried about where am I going to get money to feed myself, but I am now. And so I believe he speaks into that. And he says, do not worry. You can only have one master, God or Mammon. God or the love of money. And he says, don't worry about what you got to feed. Don't be anxious about tomorrow. Don't worry about it. He's speaking into a real raw situation for them, where they're thinking, oh my, like, the people that see me here, are they going to say that, oh, I saw him listening to that guy? And he's saying, don't worry. God cares for the flowers, he'll care for you. He'll clothe you. You can't think of how your future is going to work, but I can. It's okay. Trust me, do the right thing, and it will all work out. Trust me. Just trust me. And so I think some of that is him when he's saying, look, here they are, they're with God, they're with the Lamb in heaven, they're safe. And some of this stuff around Revelation, you know, he wipes away every tear from their eye. That's him saying, you could just be really worried reading this and thinking, gosh, I'm called to war with a very powerful system. That's at war, and it kills, it really does. And it takes jobs, it stops me buying and selling, it really does in the real world. And I'm afraid about all those things. And he's saying, don't be. You've got a bigger God who gives everything, and the unsearchable riches of Christ. If you believe in Jesus, he gives you himself. The unsearchable riches of Jesus are there for you. And we can say, I'm sorry, Lord, forgive my unbelief, forgive my worrying, my lack of trust in you. And I want to come to you and give you my all and give you my life. As we look at the last hymn, I was really convicted and thinking about this, that there is a challenge to remembrance about those who gave their lives for our way of life. Our way of life is under threat. When I knew it happened in Italy. On October the 15th, it had happened in Italy. People who hadn't got the jab were banned from working. But I hadn't read it in my own language. And I read from an Australian brother this stuff, and it is heartrending. I think, how can I say, remember these people? Remember these people who gave their lives for our way of life. That is the West, that is really Christ's way of life. It is Christ that founded the West. There's an Indian that wrote a book called The Book That Built Your World. But we don't know it, but God, the Bible, built the West. What is good about the West is built by Jesus, and there is much evil, but there has been always much evil. But there's much that is good about our way of life, and that is built by Christ. And how can I remember those who died to protect and gave their lives to protect our way of life, if I will not consider myself and count the cost myself of following and protecting this way of life? When Churchill used his words, he used them upon he was practicing his speech once in a car with a guy called Ismay Pug, or Pug Ismay, and Pug said we were traveling together in the car, and Winston was rehearsing the speech he was to give in the House of Commons on the 20th of August 1940 after the Battle of Britain. And when he came to the famous sentence, never in the history of mankind have so many owed so much to so few, Ismay said, well, what about Jesus and his disciples? Good old Pug, said Winston, who immediately changed the wording to, and the true wording reads, does anyone know it? In the history of human conflict. Yeah, he corrected it. So Winston corrected that because a man told them, no, Jesus is the only man that can be said of, and his disciples. And so it's corrected. The actual phrase goes, never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few. So it's a great opportunity. And as we sing this last hymn, which is number 865. Yeah, we can think, what if it's so again? I hope and pray that these things are but a passing glimmer. Everything I see in the news and read worldwide says it's coming to a place near you, unless there's mass scale repentance, because this, like I said, these judgments come over centuries, not over years. Will it be so again? And what part will we play? And the first thing, we want to raise the banner to the only man who properly contests this war, and align ourselves behind the Lamb who conquers, and he conquers by his blood and by dying